All right, here we go. Donald Trump's team is in Washington, meeting with members of Congress earlier this morning as he looks to build more relationships inside D.C. and broaden his appeal. We're told some lawmakers who have endorsed Trump were there. 10 House members who are on the fence also invited. This outreach comes as the Trump team is taking fresh steps to bulk up the campaign after some bumpy few weeks. And as a new CBS poll shows, Trump's lead is shrinking by 7 points since March, nationwide, that is. Yesterday, Team Trump announced the hiring of top Republican operative Rick Wiley as national political director. 2 weeks ago, they hired a delegate specialist to help navigate the complicated nominating process. So some changes behind the scenes. What do you think that does for what we actually see?
I don't think it's going to change fundamentally the way that Trump is. I don't think he's capable of doing that. I think that it's smart, regardless of who is we're talking about as the candidate. I think it's smart to bring in people who I think some of Trump's supporters are going to view as establishment types. But you have to have those people there to navigate this process. You know, it's while some of his diehard supporters, I think, would love to think he can just blow up the system and run and create a completely new, different way of becoming president. It's not the way the real world works. So you need people like this, I think, to help him if he's going to get where he wants to go. You know,
you're the money person on the couch. So I'm curious now, some of the big dollars...
For many reasons.
For many reasons. Fox Business, if you don't have it, demand it. So some of the big donors are said to be sitting out, those political donors. Do you think moves like this will get people to feel warm and fuzzy about giving money? And do you think Donald Trump will get to the point as he heads into the general where he might take some of that cash?
Well, I think people see him changing up his campaign strategy. They see him bringing new leadership on board, and it's bringing about the question, and you alluded to this, does this change the campaign? And is Donald Trump, you go back to the money point here, a guy who's used to running a company, making the decisions, telling other people what to do, how is he going to receive the advice and recommendation of these Republicans that he's bringing on board? Will he be receptive to that? So I haven't heard a lot of people forecasting his ability to take in that advice from those that he's hiring on board, but he's got to be willing to do that.
You know, it was interesting. So the dynamic of family came into play for all these candidates pretty heavily on the GOP side this week, as many interviews have involved their families. And one of the things we saw was his children talking about his listening skills and his ability to kind of be that person who has some range. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, he should listen to the people that he's brought on, and I do think that his supporters will forgive him. I mean, they've forgiven him for a lot bigger things than bringing on establishment consultants. But looking at some of the names here on this list, Harris, these people are very impressive, and he knows that he needs them. I mean, no man is an island when you're trying to win the presidency. You're going to need help. One of the names on that list is Don McGahn, one of the smartest legal minds in Washington, D.C., who I know, a very, very smart hire. He needs these people in place at this point. He can't do everything himself, but I would also encourage him to bring on some foreign policy advisors and some national defense advisors and some other folks to advise him, and he really does have to start listening on that front as well.
Well, he said months ago that he was going to do that, and I remember on the air you saying, well, when is that actually going to happen? So I want to lean a little bit on your legal background, Ebony, because I know that when you're putting a legal team together, somebody takes front step. I don't know how you make that decision. So today on the Hill, we knew that Representatives Duncan Hunter out of California and Chris Collins out of New York would be part of this session with Donald Trump. Now we're learning that these meetings are going to take place weekly and that those two men are leading. What kind of tips off that decision?
Okay, so in the law, and I appreciate you framing it in this legal context here, it's kind of like who's going to make the opening statement.
Exactly.
Who's going to present the theory, introduce. The introduction's so important. So that tells me that Donald Trump and his team of close, intimate advisors have decided that those two individuals are best suited, best equipped to present the argument of Trump as a national, successful candidate. So I think that tells us a lot there. To your point about family, though, Harris, we've seen many interviews, I know I have over the years, of Donald Trump's reliance on his daughter, Ivanka.
Yeah.
And he really listens to her, and he really defers sometimes to her leadership. So I do think there's some opportunity as this thing gets more and more, in the general stage, if he gets to that point, to rely on that. And also I think that helps him, again, with his issue with some women.
You know, and so we went from legal, and now I want to go back to military, and people are probably wondering, how does that fit? Because when you put together a team for military, too, you've got operatives out there.
Right.
So you heard Andrea talking about who's there. You've got Barry Bennett on the team now, and Paul Manafort, who's doing the delegate count and lead, and you've got some really strong voices out there. What does that tell you about where Trump's going at this point? And what does that tell you about